Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 4th of June. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. I'm Mark Broom. It's local election day here in Korea. Polling stations around the nation opened at 6 a.m. Korea time. That's around 4 hours ago. And they will remain open until 6 p.m. As of 9 a.m. on this election day, turnout for the entire nation stands at 9.3%. That's slightly over 3.8 million of Korea's 41.3 million eligible voters. We must point out, though, that this does not include the early voting turnout figure. This is just purely for today. Breaking it down by city first, you can see there in Seoul we're at 8.4%, the southern city of Busan 9%, Daegu 9.2%, Incheon, Gwangju, Daejeon and Ulsan are all at or slightly above 8%. The administrative city of Sejong stands at 12%. Now, looking at the region, starting with the most populous, Gyeonggi-do province, turnout there is at 8.5% as of 1 hour ago. All of the other provincial areas have a turnout of over 10%, with the only exception being Gyeongsangnam-do province at 9.1%. Now, voters are casting their ballots for the over 3,900 district and provincial governor, councillor and education chief posts up for grabs. Our Song Ji-son is standing by at a polling station in Seoul's central Gyeonggi-do district. So, Ji-son, 4 hours have passed since the doors opened. Are we seeing a steady stream of voters there now?
Mark, good to see you again this morning. Like I mentioned at our 6 a.m. newscast, there are people waiting outside the door to become the first to cast their votes in this year's elections. Now, more and more people are lining up at this hour, but the capital's turnout rate is lower than that of other cities and provinces at 8.4%, about 1 percentage point short of the nation's average as of 9 a.m. Korea time. It's been especially hard to predict how the races will turn out this time around, with the adoption of the early voting period and factoring in the impacts of the Sewol ferry disaster. Here in Seoul, the ratio of those in their 20s and 30s are the highest in the nation at 39.7%, slightly outnumbering those in their 50s and older, standing at 39.6%. The young vote was also the highest during the early election, accounting for nearly 16% of the total 11.5% early turnout. In fact, I did notice there were quite a number of senior citizens dropped by to cast their votes, as well as a lot of young voters here. Younger generations are usually considered progressive, while the elderly are more conservative, so voting numbers between these two groups will be one of the deciding factors in whether incumbent Mayor Park Won-soon of the opposition party will continue at his post, or the ruling Saenuri Party's multi-term lawmaker Chung Mong-jun will beat the odds. I'm Song Ji-son reporting live from Gyeonggi-do district in Seoul.
Now to Gyeonggi-do province, which is a region on the outskirts of Seoul, which is getting a lot of attention at this year's elections, not only because of its location and its huge population, but also for the tight race that is expected there between the ruling and the main opposition party. For more, we have our Connie Lee standing by at a polling station in Gyeonggi-do province. Connie.
Good morning, Mark. I'm reporting live to you from a polling station just outside of the capital in the city of Suwon in Gyeonggi-do province. Now, we have seen a steady flow of voters coming here to this polling station since polls opened at 6 this morning. Now, the age range of those voters have varied, with both the old and young coming out. Now, citizens here are voting for a new governor of Gyeonggi-do province, but the outcome, however, is unpredictable this year because it's seen as one of the tightest races in the nation. But besides that, a lot of eyes are on this region of Korea because of its regional significance of Gyeonggi-do province. With its very close proximity to the capital Seoul, the politics here and ultimately the outcome of the race here play an influential and important role in the central government. Politics of Gyeonggi-do province Gyeonggi-do province also covers a large area, being the most populated province with about 12 million residents and nearly 10 million eligible voters. Also this year, more attention is on how citizens will vote here. The recent Seoul ferry disaster especially affected many of the citizens here in this province. You know, the city of Ansan, or the location of the high school that lost hundreds of students and teachers in the ferry accident, is actually part of Gyeonggi-do province. So people here who are disappointed with the ruling party's handling of the situation, there are predictions that they might vote for the other party for their governor. Mark?
Yeah, Connie, I'm sure the ferry disaster is still very high on the minds of the voters and is bound to be a variable in this election, particularly there in Gyeonggi-do province, for the reasons you mentioned. So we are expecting a tight race, as you said. Tell us more about the two main candidates.
Well, it is neck and neck between the ruling party's Saenuri Party's candidate Nam Kyung-pil and the main opposition New Politics Alliance Democracy candidate Kim Jin-pyo. Now, in the last opinion poll legally available and conducted in mid-May by Media Research, Saenuri Party's Nam had a voter approval rating of 40.2%. Now, that was just slightly higher than Kim's approval rating with 39.4%. You know, before the Seoul ferry disaster, opinion polls show that Nam did have a clear edge over Kim. But after the incident, you now see that voter sentiment has clearly changed. Reporting live from Suwon in Gyeonggi-do province, this has been Connie Lee.
Thank you, Connie, and good to see democracy in action there. Now, for a more detailed look at the key races, including those taking place in these June 4th local elections, our Ji Myung-gil has this report.
More than 3,500 local government positions are up for grabs, and political parties are making last-ditch efforts to earn voter support on election day. The latest poll showed the ruling Saenuri Party had the upper hand in 6 regions. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy was ahead in 5 regions, and in 4 regions, the rival parties were neck and neck. When looking at hotly contested regions, incumbent Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon was in a comfortable lead by more than 18 percentage points against his ruling Saenuri Party rival Chung Mong-jun. In the port city of Incheon, incumbent Mayor Song Young-gil was in a tight race with his conservative counterpart Yoo Jung-bok with only a 3.2 percentage point difference. For the governor's seat in Gyeonggi-do province, the Saenuri Party's Nam Kyung-pil was in a slight lead with 36%, while the main opposition MPAD's Kim Jin-pyo earned 34.7%. In the ruling party's stronghold of the southern port city of Busan, independent Oh Go-don was in a heated race with Saenuri Party candidate Seo Byung-soo. And in the liberals' power base of the city of Gwangju, independent Kang Un-tae trailed 1.1 percentage points behind the MPAD's Yoon Jang-hyun. Political analysts say the reason behind a jump in support for independent candidates is because the two cities feel the necessity to implement some sort of checks and balances system.
The people of Busan, they've been electing the Saenuri candidate in every presidential election in the past, and they feel as if that even despite their consistent support, the presidents from the Saenuri Party haven't really done enough for their region. And also pretty much the same thing in Gwangju.
Wednesday's local election is also being seen as a midterm evaluation of President Park Geun-hye's administration in the wake of April's ferry disaster. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
Now, in almost all recent elections here in Korea, swing voters have been deciding the fate of the candidates and the parties. Today's local elections are absolutely no exception. Experts say voters in their 40s will most likely hold the key to who comes out of the day victorious. Na Hyung-young reports.
It's become an established fact in Korea that those in their 50s and older tend to support the conservatives, while people in their 30s and younger lean toward liberal parties. That usually leaves people in their 40s making up most of the swing votes. Experts say the Park Geun-hye administration's handling of the Seoul ferry disaster has changed today's election dynamics in many ways.
국무총리 Swing voters who saw Prime Minister nominee An Dae-hee withdraw his nomination due to personal ethical issues felt the government was not trustworthy. If a lot of those voters head to the polls, they will likely sway the election results.
But it's not just the ruling party that's being hurt.
There's bound to be a so-called incumbent advantage because the campaign came to a halt for a few weeks due to the ferry disaster. That made it very difficult for challenging candidates to establish their positions.
As for the roughly 12% of the electorate who came out for last week's two-day early voting, most experts say it's unlikely that this will pump up the turnout.
If people take Thursday off, they can go on a long holiday because Memorial Day falls on Friday. So I think those who participated in the early voting are probably people who were going to vote anyway, but can't because of their schedule, meaning there won't be a drastic increase in the overall voter turnout.
All that remains now is to see how many people head to the polls and for their ballots to be counted. Daejeon, ARIRANG News.
Now, whatever happens in these elections, the results are going to have a significant impact on Korea's political landscape over the coming months. They could be a good indicator of what we can expect at the next presidential race as well. Our Park Ji-won reports.
The results of the June 4th local elections will significantly change the political landscape of Korea. If the ruling camp wins the election, despite harsh public criticism against the incumbent government following its poor handling of the ferry disaster, the Park Geun-hye administration could gain enough political momentum to steer the state affairs for the rest of her term. The government's ambitious policy goals, which include deregulation reforms and a 3-year plan for economic innovation, may also gain political support. However, if the ruling Saenuri party loses to opposition camps, not only in its traditionally weak regions, but also in regions where neck-and-neck races are expected, the Conservative Party will be in a turmoil starting from an upcoming party convention scheduled in July. Politicians inside the party who are close to President Park will most likely be held responsible. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy will also face diverging scenarios according to the results of the elections. If it wins the elections, the late March merger of the former main opposition Democratic Party and political icon An Chol-soo's New Political Vision Party will gain the justification it so desperately needs. The co-leadership of Kim Han-gil and An Chol-soo will be strengthened in preparing for the next general elections and eventually the next presidential election. But in the case that the main opposition loses in major neck-and-neck race regions, the co-leadership will be significantly hurt, and the fledgling party could face the danger of being embroiled in factional strife. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
That a team of South Korea.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. For the first time, a US official has spoken publicly about Washington's desire to deploy a US missile defense system in South Korea. It remains to be seen whether the move is to counter North Korea, China, or both. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The top commander for U.S. forces in Korea has asked Washington to deploy an advanced American missile defense system in Korea, a move that may push Seoul closer to joining Washington's missile defense system, along with Japan. Speaking at a lecture in Seoul on Tuesday, General Curtis Scaparrotti said he had recommended that the Pentagon set up the system known as a Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, to Korea. Scaparrotti's comments are the first from a U.S. official that confirm it is looking into deploying its high-altitude defense shield on the peninsula. THAAD is a U.S.-led missile defense system capable of intercepting ballistic missiles at high altitudes of up to 150 kilometers in their terminal phase. Earlier reports said that Washington had conducted a site survey for possible deployment locations for the THAAD system. But is it a good fit for South Korea?
start is very controversial regarding the efficiency and adaptability and interoperability. A lot of concepts we should consider.
Some experts say the U.S. is not using the system to prevent threats from Pyongyang, but rather to counter China's growing presence in the region.
It's still too early to say that China is all against the Chinese rising military power. We should focus on North Korea's direct missile system and its North Korea's very provocative actions, including the post-nuclear test and another series of missile tests.
The recommendation is in the initial stages of consideration. General Scott Barati said a final decision will come after close discussions between Korea and the U.S. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Now it seems another wrinkle has been added to the already strained relations between Korea and Japan over Tokyo's continued territorial claims to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island in the East Sea. The Japanese government says it will send a senior official to a gathering in Tokyo on Thursday that will support Japan's attempts to lay claim to Dokdo, which is called Takashima in Japan. The Minister of State for Okinawa and Northern Territories Affairs, Ichita Yamamoto, said Tuesday that Deputy Cabinet Minister and member of the House of Representatives in the Diet, Masazumi Gotouda, will attend the event. Gotouda is ranked higher than vice ministers of government departments. Minister Yamamoto says the government was trying hard to find an effective way to express Tokyo's position on the Dokdo issue and found this was their final decision. Now, Korea has placed a lowly 90th out of 138 countries when it comes to people who say they are living happy lives. US-based Gallup says Korea scored 63 according to its index, which is the same figure as the Czech Republic, Luxembourg and Kazakhstan. Except for Denmark, the top 10 countries were from South and Central America. Paraguay topped the list for the third straight year, followed by Panama. Gallup asked the respondents questions like, did you feel respected yesterday? And did you have plenty of rest yesterday? And if they answered yes, they added points. In each country, the agency asked 1,000 residents over the age of 15. Time now for a look through our international headlines that we are following on this Wednesday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by in the news centre there. Good morning to you, Eunice. The presidential election, a basic rubber stamp vote for the Assad regime, is now over in civil war-ridden Syria.
That's right, Mark. The violence still very much ongoing. As opposition forces said, 28 people died on voting day. Polls closed earlier this morning or midnight local time only in state-controlled regions. No voting was held in rebel-held parts of Syria's north and east. President Bashar al-Assad, who ran against two relatively unknown challengers, is widely expected to win a third 7-year term in office. The state had said the vote is a sign that the country is moving forward as it takes place under a new constitution. But his opponents and world governments are condemning the election as a, quote, grotesque parody and a sham. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had urged Damascus not to hold the polls amid a 3-year civil war that has killed some 150,000 people and displaced 42% of Syrians. And over in Egypt, former military chief Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has been declared the country's next president, officially replacing the Islamist leader he deposed last year. Its election commission announced el-Sisi won with nearly 97% of the ballot. Voter turnout was just over 47%. Hundreds of people took to Cairo's Tahrir Square to celebrate, dancing and setting off fireworks, while opponent Hamdin Sabahi conceded defeat. He alleged the vote wasn't without irregularities, saying some of his campaign staff were detained and members of el-Sisi's camp were allowed inside polling stations. Beijing has defended its detention of government critics ahead of today's anniversary of the Tiananmen Square crackdown as lawful. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Lei, in a daily briefing on Tuesday, said there are only lawbreakers and no so-called dissidents in China, and called on its legal authority to be respected. Dozens of activists were detained or placed under house arrest, according to human rights groups. Today marks 25 years since the massacre at Tiananmen Square, the bloody crackdown against pro-democracy student activists at Beijing Center.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off in the PGA this time, as golfers have been trying to qualify for the upcoming U.S. Open. And for two Korean golfers, they got the ticket they need. Now, with the regional qualifying rounds coming to an end, two South Korean golfers have qualified for the major, as No Sung-yeol and Kim Young-sung will be competing in the big event next week after qualifying in their regional event. Meanwhile, Gwangju, aka KJ Choi, will not be competing in the event next week after failing to qualify, ending his 48th straight major qualification. And now moving over to some Tuesday night's KBO action, where a few games were canceled due to rain, but the NC Dinos beat the Nexen Heroes 5-3 thanks to Eric Thames and his second Grand Slam of the season. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the battle between the two big cats, the Samsung Lions taking on the Kia Tigers. Now, of course, going into the game here, second inning, Lee Ji-young flies out to right, tagging up is Lee Seung-yup, and it's 1-0 Samsung. We go over to the fourth inning of the game. Park Ki-nam sac fly to left. Na Ji-won would score here, and we're tied 1-1. Fifth inning, another sac fly, this time from Che Tae-in to center field, and Samsung has the lead 2-1. Now Samsung gets more insurance run here thanks to Park Han-hee and his RBI ground out to second base. Meanwhile, Samsung's Yoon Sung-won pitching a brilliant game here, throwing 6 2/3 inning, striking out 7 while giving up just 1 run, as the Samsung Lions win this game 4-1. And now finishing things off in the UFC, where the president of UFC, Dana White, has come out in an interview recently and talked about Korea's chances at hosting their first UFC event. Now, according to Dana White, he's 100% sure that the biggest mixed martial arts competition will come to Korea, as he added that he's been impressed with how much the sport is loved here in the nation. He acknowledged that the market for UFC is huge in Korea and plans to hold the event in the near future. Meanwhile, Mexico will hold their first UFC event in November. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, it's a local election day here in Korea, and the weather conditions should cooperate for most of us. It should be mostly to partly sunny day, but showers are expected down south. Southeastern region is expected to receive 20 to 60 millimeters of showers, while the rest of the southern provinces will see 20 millimeters of the rain at the most. Well, it's hot again here in Seoul, but the rest of the regions will continue to have cooler readings today, hovering in the low to mid-20s across the region. And it seems like temperatures will stay on the warm side. Tomorrow will be slightly cooler than today, but on Friday, which is a Memorial Day here in Korea, temperatures will jump up to 30 degrees Celsius here in Seoul. So please do keep that in mind, and let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul started out at 20, then the high will rise to 28, while Daegu and Busan tops out at 22, and Gwangju should climb to 25 later on. Let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju should see a high of 25. Daejeon and Dokdo will reach 27 and 22 respectively, while Mount Gyeonggi tops out at 13. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. Do stay tuned to ARIRANG TV for the latest on today's key local election races. We'll be back with another newscast at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.